Hey, good evening, everybody. So this is uh, going to be my cancer story. I've been thinking about this for a little while about wanting to kind of try to document, um, my process with being diagnosed with cancer. And so I thought kind of the first thing to do would just be to kind of introduce myself and talk about um, my diagnosis and kind of where I am today as I'm just kind of starting this journey. So it's November 8th, 2019, and so my name is Eric Martins. I am 39 years old. I am a commander in the United States Navy, Civil Engineer Corps officer. I'm also a husband to Cassandra Martins, my wife. We're high school sweethearts, so we've been together since 1997, so going on 22 years. And we have two amazing, beautiful, smart, intelligent daughters. My oldest daughter is named Elizabeth. She goes by Liz, and she's 19 and a sophomore at the University of Colorado, SCO Buffs. That's my alma mater for my grad school. And my youngest daughter, Juliana, I call her Jules, is 16, and she is a junior at Wheeler High School. So I am actually a geo-bachelor, military terminology. So I'm currently stationed at orders, and I work at the Pentagon as a requirements officer for the Expeditionary Warfare Division. And Cassandra and my daughter Jules live up in Connecticut right now, and so that Jules can go to high school there and finish with her friends. So they call me a geographic bachelor because due to location of my tour, I'm separated from my family right now. So basically, I've been down here in DC since the summer of 2018, and Cassandra and the girls, well, Elizabeth is at college during the year, but in the summer are home in Connecticut. So it's a challenging environment, but something that's not uncommon in military families. You have to make the best decisions for each family situation. So my cancer story starts back in August of this year. So I would say probably about the second week of August this year, I just woke up in the morning, and my normal morning routine, and wake up, hop in the shower, and the first thing I was in the shower and washing, and I noticed some tenderness in my testicle. And so obviously they tell you and that you need to do self checks. All men should be doing monthly self checks, and I wouldn't say that I was commonly doing self checks, but I knew it was something that I definitely needed to do because my grandfather was actually diagnosed with testicular cancer when he was roughly my age. And so I noticed some swelling and tenderness. I did a self check in the shower, and I couldn't feel anything as far as like any kind of nodules or deformities of the testicle, but I could feel that it was swollen and somewhat hard, in comparison to the other one. So, so I didn't think a lot about it because, I ride my bike a lot. So I live about 10, 11 miles from the Pentagon. And for anybody that's ever been to DC, they know that the traffic is horrible. So, I usually try to commute via via bike to save some time and having to deal with traffic, good exercise, and get out um, in the weather, and just kind of enjoy the ride to work versus fighting traffic. So I thought, well, maybe I hit a tree root or something like that on the trail, and just kind of dinged myself and bruised myself. So um, I kind of I wouldn't say I ignored it. I was aware of it, but I didn't go in immediately, thinking that it would get better. So I waited about a little over a week or so, and it just wasn't getting better. It just was actually getting worse. It was a little bit more painful, and I was kind of feeling some a little bit of like tingling, I guess, or somewhat of a painful urination. And sorry for folks if you think I'm giving too much information, but I think it's important for people to kind of understand the signs and symptoms of things to look for when something's going on. So I went to the doctor, and I think it was around August 22nd or 23rd. I just went into the clinic in the Pentagon and sick call and asked to make an appointment. And that was the first time I'd actually seen my PCM there, Dr. Williams, who really, really awesome guy. And obviously he did his own exam, and he could tell that there was some swelling and something going on there. And so basically he said, hey, we need to get this checked out. We need to do an ultrasound. And so, gave me the referral for the ultrasound because they didn't have that capability there at the clinic. So I called Fort Belvoir Hospital to get scheduled, and was promptly told, actually I was pretty rudely told, to be honest with you, not very happy with Fort Belvoir, by the way, but that they couldn't see me for a month. So, I let the doctor know, but that was kind of the best they could do with the appointment. Scheduled me for an ultrasound on September 23rd. So I'm literally a month from my first going into the first chance I would have to have something looked at via ultrasound. And Cassandra and I were planning, we actually were going on a little bit of a trip a week later. And so, I just kind of tried to go about my day and my weeks, and hoping that it would kind of resolve itself, and that it really wasn't anything. And actually, after about 2.5 weeks, the swelling had basically gone down. It was pretty much back to normal, and I had actually kind of considered not even going to my ultrasound. But I actually told Cassandra, I feel okay. But I might as well go ahead and go since the appointment's already been made. So I went to the ultrasound on the 23rd, and I almost immediately kind of knew that something was wrong because I've seen ultrasounds, 2 kids, I've seen ultrasounds done at least for having babies, and this ultrasound was taking a significant amount of time. And the tech was taking a lot of pictures. And so, I kind of had a feeling that, this was kind of out of the norm. And so it took almost an hour. Went back to work, and, I actually told my coworkers, because they kind of knew I had an appointment, and kind of asked what was going on. And I kind of filled them in, and, I said, hey, I think I feel like something's wrong because that ultrasound took way too long, and the tech was very adamant about me following up with the doc. When I logged onto my computer, I already had an email from Dr. Williams that saying, hey, need to talk to you. Can you come in tomorrow at 1:00? And so I kind of felt you kind of get that bad feeling in your gut. And so obviously I was pretty worried, but still hopeful. So next day went to work, went about my regular business. Actually had lunch with some fellow Civil Engineer Corps officers there at the Pentagon. We kind of have a weekly Tuesday lunch, and everything was good. As I was leaving the lunch, my cell phone rang, and it was it was the Fort Belvoir Hospital for the urologist there, and basically they said, "Hey, the urologist has looked at your stuff. We need to see you as soon as possible. How soon can you get there?" And at the time, I'd forgotten that I'd even ridden my bike to work that day, so I was like, I'll be there in an hour and a half." And they said, "Okay, just let us know when you get here." So I went back to the office real quick, packed up my stuff frantically, because obviously I was pretty shaken. Emailed Dr. Williams, "Hey, I can't see you at 1 o'clock. They want me to come in as soon as possible." And, then I remembered, oh crap, I'd ridden my bike. So, hey, I got to do an 11-mile ride home as quick as possible and get my car and then drive another 30 minutes to Fort Belvoir. But so I hopped on my bike, hauling ass, as quick as I can home. And about 15 minutes into my ride, my phone rings. So I quickly pull off to the side, answer the phone, and it's Dr. Williams. And he's like, "Hey, what's going on? I got your email." And I said, "Hey, Fort Belvoir called. They want me there as soon as possible." And he's like, he didn't understand why Fort Belvoir had called, because he had already contacted Walter Reed apparently. But he's like, "Hey, go ahead and go see them." He said, "But I don't want you going in blind. What we were going to talk about is, we think you have testicular cancer. You have a mass in the testicle, and that generally, 90% of the time is testicular cancer." So I was pretty shaken. Not really the way you kind of want to receive news that you have cancer. But let me just I know I've been dragging on for a long time, so that for those of you that are still sticking with me, I don't have testicular cancer, so I actually have Ewing sarcoma. But let me tell you how we got to that. So got to Fort Belvoir, met with the urologist. He basically informed me the same thing. "Hey, you have a 4 centimeter mass in your testicle, and we're pretty sure it's testicular cancer. You need to have surgery to remove it as soon as possible. When was the last time you ate?" And I was like, "Oh, I just did." And he said, "Okay, well, we can't do the surgery today then, but we need to do it tomorrow." And so, I'm just kind of stunned, I guess I would say, at the time. So they immediately sent me for blood work and for a CT. And I had to make phone calls, let my work know, try to arrange care to get the surgery, since my wife Cassandra's not down here. Let Cassandra know. So plans rapidly came together, and my buddy Jorth from work agreed to take me to surgery the next day. And so basically the next morning at 4:30 in the morning, Jorth was picking me up and driving me into surgery at Fort Belvoir to have an orchiectomy, which is where they go in and remove the testicle and the attachments for that. So went in, had the surgery that morning, and at the time they basically told me, right as I was going into surgery, that, "Hey, we also saw the reading on your CT. You have an enlarged lymph node, which could be bad, and you have a 3 millimeter node on your lungs, which also could be bad. But they say, hey, we need to do the surgery, to know for sure." And so I had the surgery. Woke up a couple hours later. Once I was better, my buddy Jorth took me to his house, and Cassandra had arranged a flight for me that evening that my doctor had approved out of Reagan Airport up to Connecticut. Jorth took me that evening, dropped me off at the curb, wheelchair picked me up, put me on the plane, and flew me to Connecticut, wheeled me off to the curb where Cassandra was waiting for me, and took me to our home in Connecticut, so I could recoup for about 3 weeks or so. Or actually, no, 2 weeks. And so during that 2 weeks, the doctor had said, hey, as soon as we find out something, we'll give you a call. So, for those of you who can't understand, or for those of you who have cancer, what it's like waiting. But for those of you that don't, it's pretty excruciating, kind of waiting for what that diagnosis is going to be. And waiting. I called at the end of 1 week. Hey, we don't have anything for you. At 2 weeks, I had to fly back to DC for my follow-up appointment at Fort Belvoir post-surgery. Go into the appointment, get checked out. Everything's fine, surgically with the healing. And I asked the doc, hey, what's going on with my cancer diagnosis? And he says, hey, well, what I can tell you is that you do have cancer. What I can't tell you is what type of cancer you have. He says that we think you have a neuroendocrine tumor. That's what the pathologist here thinks. But sorry, I'm trying to fix the lighting here. But she's unsure. So your sample had to be sent to the Joint Pathology Council, which is a kind of a council. It's experts, for on the military side that specialize in diagnosing cancers, and that it usually takes about 2 weeks for them to come back with results. And I said, well, it's already been 2 weeks, and they said, yeah, well, we'll let you know as soon as we have something. So the surgery was on September 25th. This was 2 weeks later, so it was mid-October. So no answer still. So again, waiting. And I can't tell you how mentally draining and anguishing it is to know that you have cancer and to feel like nothing is happening with it. Another week goes by, call again. I check with Dr. Williams. Hey, do you have anything? Can you push for something? Nothing. Nothing again. And so another week goes by. So I'm now at 4 weeks to the day that I had my orchiectomy, and about 8 weeks at the time from when I had first noticed symptoms. And I get a call at work on the morning of October 22nd, and it's Dr. Kelly, the doctor who had originally performed my urologist who had performed my surgery. And he says, hey, we got the results back from the Joint Pathology Council. You have Ewing sarcoma. I'd never even heard of Ewing sarcoma before. He said, hey, I don't know a lot about Ewing sarcoma. He says that, I looked up an article, I read an article about it. It's a pediatric cancer. It's a rare, very rare bone and soft tissue cancer that there's about roughly 250 newly diagnosed cases in the U.S. of Ewing sarcoma each year. But it's primarily in the average age is about 15 years old for diagnosis. And so he says, hey, we're going to be switching your care to Walter Reed, and the doctor over there will be calling you, later today. I've texted with him. He's going to be calling you. So I immediately, my heart dropped. I was upset. I didn't really know what to think. You could say I was somewhat in shock. I went up to the office and I just couldn't be there. I just needed to get out. So I told my boss that, hey, I said, I got my diagnosis. I need to go home. So I left, I packed up my stuff and left for the day, and, talked talked to Cassandra, obviously, let her know. But I was obviously upset, and came back to my apartment here, where I'm sitting in now, and just waited and waited and waited and never got a phone call. Never got a phone call that day. So for any of you people that are watching, or if anybody's watching this as a doctor, do not do that to your patients. I'd known that I had most likely had cancer since September 24th, the day after my ultrasound, and it was now October 22nd, 23rd, and the way I was notified both times was just complete fucking garbage. And then the fact that, I'm notified with a 5-minute phone call from a guy that doesn't know anything about the cancer that I have, and then them told I'm going to be called, and I'm not. I'm not called for 24 hours. My boss was irate. Everybody was pissed. I finally get a call from the doctor at Walter Reed the next day, who spends about 10 minutes kind of going over and explaining things with me. Explaining what he believes the next treatment path will be, which is what he suggests is a RPL&D surgery, which is retroperitoneum or lymph node dissection, which is a common treatment for people with testicular cancer, because the testicular cancer generally spreads the testicles drain to the lymph nodes. So generally the first place that the testicular cancer drains to is into the lymph nodes. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm an engineer, so I'm just going off of what I've read and what's been told to me. But that's a pretty, I would say, almost barbaric surgery. It cuts you from just like 2 fingers below the sternum all the way down to the groin, and has to go in and remove all your lymph nodes. So he tells me that, that's most likely the next step, along with, probably some chemo, but that I need to get a PET scan to determine the staging. So, for those of you that don't know, I'll talk in a later video about CTs and PET scans and MRIs, because I've had several of them now at this point. And I'll kind of explain the differences between them and kind of what it feels like to get one. But so they said, hey, you need to get a PET scan. So we put the referral in, you need to call and schedule that. So I called, and guess what? Well, you don't have to wait a month for a PET scan, but you got to wait a week. So, hey, your PET scan is scheduled for a week from October 23rd. So whatever that was, October 28th, to get your PET scan scheduled. So scheduled that. And again, right? So I know that I have Ewing sarcoma. I don't really know anything about it, and I don't know how bad it is from a staging perspective at this point. And I'm now, let's say, 9 weeks, a little over 9 weeks from when I first noticed the symptoms. So I'm sure you can only imagine how I'm feeling at this point, having trouble concentrating at work and staying focused, just because of the uncertainty with everything. So in the meantime, I actually I happened to, I was limping post-surgery when I had gone back to work, and I was limping down the hallway in the Pentagon, and I actually ran into somebody started asking me some questions, and it ended up being an admiral. And so I was talking to him, and he's like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm a doctor, and I work just down the hallway here, and I'm more than happy to talk to you if you got any questions. So as my frustration had mounted with how I was being cared for, I finally decided to make a meeting with the admiral and talk to him. And I won't put his name on the video here, but he was awesome, extremely helpful. Immediately started making phone calls to try to give me some answers and get people behind my case. And it seemed like I don't know if anybody got a talking to or what, but it seemed like it really helped because the next day I got a phone call from the doc, and hey, the PET scan got um, turned around very quickly, and consultations got done, and my doctor, again, I won't name the doctors that he consulted with. Either consulted with doctors at John Hopkins as well as Indiana University, but I kind of had a bit of a concern with who he was consulting with. Not about their expertise, because from what I did the research on them, these guys were awesome that he was consulting with, but he was consulting with testicular cancer specialists and urology oncologist type specialists. And I just kind of had a feeling that somebody that has expertise in Ewing sarcoma should also be consulted with. And so the doctor came back, hey, consulted with everybody. We all agree on the way ahead. You need to have the RPLND surgery. We want to schedule it for Monday, which would have been November 4th. This was like 3 days before Monday. This is like November 1st. Hey, we want to schedule for the RPLND on the 4th. And that'll be followed up. Basically, we'll biopsy the lymph nodes during the surgery, and if we don't find any cells in there, you may not have to do any chemo, or then they ended up coming back about a day later and said, well, we would probably do 2 rounds or 1 round of chemo, just 1 round of VAC-IE, which is the common chemo for Ewing's. But and if we do find cells, you'll do 2 rounds. And so I didn't know a lot about the chemo at that point. So I said, okay. But in the meantime, I had been pushing on my own for a second opinion. And I had done a lot of research and found out that Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York has a sarcoma center. They have a team of 6 doctors up there that, almost all they do is treat Ewing sarcoma patients. They have research fellows there that do research in it. They do clinical trials in Ewing sarcoma. I mean, these guys are, if not the top, they're in the top, top 3 or 4, top, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the country in treating Ewing sarcoma. So with a lot of help from Dr. Williams, and I don't mind naming him because he's a rock star at the Pentagon, and my care coordinator there as well, Miss Butler, pushing through for me to get this second opinion. And they worked it urgently on a Friday afternoon, late into the afternoon. I had taken that Friday off to go to Connecticut and watch Jules play volleyball. And they were calling me at the volleyball game, hey, we're pushing this through, we're contacting people, and they got my referral pushed through and approved. Sloan Kettering was amazing and waiting on things and working to help as well, and pushing to get CDs of my scans and surgery reports and everything like that. So they got me scheduled for a referral up there for Wednesday of this week, which is November 6th. So I had the surgery. I had the RPLND scheduled for the 14th of November. I'd already made arrangements with family for my mom to fly out and stay with Jules, and Cassandra was going to come down to DC and be with me for the surgery and help me recover for the 10 or so days down here before I would be allowed to travel back up to Connecticut to recover. RPLND is about a 6 to 8 week recovery time because of how really traumatizing the surgery is, how hard it is on your body. And so we had all that coordinated, but I was holding out on this referral at Sloan Kettering. So, and my work was awesome. They gave me orders to go up to New York, take the train up to see the docs up there. So Wednesday I went to Sloan Kettering. Completely different than how I had been treated to date so far. I went in. It's a pediatric hospital because, as I said, Ewing sarcoma is a pediatric cancer, and so they initially were like, "Hey, whose dad are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm the patient." So a little bit weird, and also very kind of sad, and a little bit really tugs at your heart because of all the kids that are in there that are going through, the stages of treatment that I'm going to be going through. But, they're doing it at such a young age, and really kind of painful to see that. But, was immediately met by two doctors who, immediately treated me like I was their only patient. Hey, this appointment's for you. We'll answer all your questions. Take as long as you need. I got Cassandra on the speakerphone, and I would say we talked for almost 2 hours, and they explained, everything to us about Ewing sarcoma that we could think to ask. They explained potential treatment, potential way ahead. And basically what they said was that, what they've learned in cancer research is that you treat the cancer, not the location. And so they're like, hey, you're being treated as if you have testicular cancer, but you don't have testicular cancer. You have Ewing sarcoma that just happened to form in your testicle. And so another fun fact, they said, you're only the 6th documented case ever in the world of Ewing sarcoma forming in the testicle. So I am approximately 0.78 per 1 billion of those that have Ewing sarcoma in the testicle. So not only is Ewing sarcoma rare, but I would say I am the extreme unicorn of Ewing sarcoma as far as the location wise of where it formed. But what they basically recommended is that my cancer be treated as Ewing's sarcoma, which is a pretty extensive treatment plan of about 14 rounds of chemotherapy. And so they've given me basically two options. There's the standard Ewing's sarcoma chemotherapy path, which is about 14 rounds. It's called VAC, alternating IE. And or they actually have a clinical trial going on right now, it's still 14 rounds, but the first 7 rounds are the VAC IE, and then the following 7 rounds is a different form of chemo drug that I won't get into right now. But basically, it's a drug that's more commonly used in relapse cases of Ewing sarcoma, but they feel that, or their study is trying to look at, they believe it gives a better long-term outcome of no chance of relapse. So that's what I'm planning to go with. So as of now, November 8th, my team, Dr. Williams, and my care coordinator, Miss Butler, are frantically working to get all my authorizations and insurance authorizations approved so that I can switch my care to Sloan Kettering. Basically what they said is if I followed the other protocol, I would most likely relapse, and the chance of survival if I relapse is not very good. Ewing sarcoma tends to metastasize to the lungs or the bone marrow, and they basically said that when that happens, it's very hard to cure. The other thing that they said is that Ewing sarcoma does not metastasize to the lymph nodes. And so they said that the RPLAND is strongly recommended against getting. And my lymph nodes in PET scans and MRIs and CTs and everything like that look good. So they're not really worried about the lymph nodes. They said if anything, they would maybe do a dye test from the location of the original tumor, and potentially do a biopsy on the first lymph node that the dye shows up in. But even that, they feel pretty comfortable in telling me that, Ewing sarcoma does not, because the type of cancer it is, does not really attack the lymph nodes. It attacks other areas. So yesterday they had a special board at Sloan where they sat the 6 expert doctors down along with their radiologists and surgeons, and looked over all my scans, my PET scans, my MRIs, my liver MRI, my CTs, and all my labs. And basically what they came back with is that they are very strongly believe that My cancer is currently localized cancer, and that is not metastasized. So that's very good news right now. Um, they're saying that to know 100%, there was one little small area of concern that they need to look at my spine. And so I actually just got back about an hour or so ago from doing a spinal MRI. And then they need to look at my bone marrow. So the first step in my treatment plan will be I also need to get an EKG, but so they're going to do an EKG. I need to get bone marrow biopsy, so they'll take bone marrow out of my hips and one other location, and then at the same time that they do that surgery, they'll also install my central line into my chest cavity and the port for me to be able to receive the chemotherapy. So it's like I said, it's Friday, November 8th. I should be starting my having that done. Right now we're looking at Friday of next week, and then immediately follow up that with my first round of chemo. So I'm sorry that I've rambled on for 36 minutes. I highly doubt that most people have stuck around for that, but I promise hope the videos in the future will be shorter, and I can answer questions or anything like that for people that people want to know, like, hey, what's it like doing this, or what's it like getting chemo, or what different things are like. So I'll plan to kind of update these vlogs. The next one I was kind of thinking of doing was what's it like to get a CT, what's it like to get a PET scan, and what's it like to get an MRI. And I'll try to kind of narrow that down to, maybe like 10 minutes or so. But if you have any questions, hit me up, hit me up in the comments, or send me a message or something like that. So that's my cancer story for now, and look forward to keeping everybody posted. Thanks.